So as you can see right here, it says Warzone update is live. Double barrel, Vanguard adjustment, and plunder overtime threshold has been increased. When we actually go look at the patch notes, it says cash threshold to enabled overtime and plunder has been increased to 2 million compared to 1 million because the matches were ending too quick and there was too much economy in play. They also fixed a collision issue with various elements across Caldera, allowing players to exploit. This is the second time they mentioned this, so it's just continuing to fix certain areas of the map that are causing issues. The more important patch is this one right here. So although this is what actually changed, this top portion is probably the more important part. In terms of the double barrel, the sawed-off, now the movement speed is decreased to 1.03, which is a 3% buff from the base compared to 4%. So 1% different, not a huge difference, but sometimes this does allow it to not feel like it's moving as fast. But the more important part was the akimbo change. Most of the time, you're not going to use this in single. 2 shots really isn't enough to get the job done unless you're in a one-on-one solo. You hit every pellet and it works, right? But besides that, very impractical. That's why a lot of people were using the akimbo, which was insanely broken. We see right here, they modify the damage. So now they almost do half of the base, which is 0.55. That's crazy. So it says damage range multiplier increase. So even though you're doing half as much damage, you get a little bit more range, which isn't really going to all be that practical. They're kind of putting it to where it's going to be nerfed into the ground, which is kind of important. It's really hard to balance shotguns. They're either incredibly overpowered or unusable. It's really hard to find that sweet spot where they're balanced, and you wouldn't be better off just using an SMG or another weapon to fill that slot. Movement speed decreased down from 1, and then hipfire spread increased slightly. So you have to be even more accurate, that much closer. So overall, a little bit harder to solve for that. So when it comes to the weapon balancing, it says we would like to take a moment to discuss some of our upcoming plans, as well as how our weapon balance philosophy will be changing in Caldera. There was normally hard metas, which really, it's not really that fun to have hard metas because you kind of got to use those weapons. If you don't like those weapons, then you still got to use them, because if you don't, then you end up losing gunfights, especially with skill-based matchmaking. Everyone in your lobby is going to be running the meta. So you're kind of at a disadvantage if you're not running that. Their goal is to get away from that, even though there will likely still be 1 or 2 weapons that are slightly better. Overall, you should have a broad range of weapons to choose from, and we'll see it graphically in a quick second. We'll be looking in to take a more incremental approach to a weapon nerfs, and that basically means instead of these hard nerfs where they're nerfed into the dirt, then maybe it gets a gradual one. Okay, it still feels good, but there's certain gunfights where you notice it. At first it'll feel like, it wasn't nerfed, but then after a little while you're like, oh, that situation came up. It is definitely nerfed, and it's definitely noticeable. We understand it can be frustrating to commit a great deal of time to the weapon to have its viability completely stripped. And this has happened multiple times. Hey, everyone, you got to use the automaton. Boom, use the automaton, level it up. Hard nerfed, no one uses it, everyone switches over to the Bren. This is kind of what you want to avoid when you're doing these things, because it can take 4 to 7 hours to level some of these weapons if you're not optimal, efficient, not double XP. And then once you level it, then you kind of get burnt. So it can be unfortunate there. We would like to reiterate that our North Star is weapon diversity. So being able to use as many weapons as possible. With that being said, we feel it is appropriate to announce that in the near future, we'll be making adjustments to Light Machine Gun Charlie, which is the Bren, as well as Submachine Gun Charlie, which is the MP40, which we know are the most 2 dominant weapons, and we'll be see it again graphically, with the intent of closing the gap between these 2 weapons and their competitors. In addition, we will be toning down what is often referred to as visual recoil on Vanguard assault rifles. And this is kind of a normal thing where you actually done recoil patterns, you shoot a wall, you go, okay, the gun's doing this. And then when you actually look at the recoil pattern, it just goes dot, 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 and you're like, okay. Why is it so hard? Like, it's actually easy to control. It's just the visual shake makes it hard. So they're going to tone that down, and that's essentially the weapon model, how much it visibly moves on the screen. By toning that down, the weapon model will more closely match what is actually happening within the recoil pattern. So it'll feel like you're able to actually control the weapon versus making it feel like it has all this wobble going on. We feel this will help promote a healthier, more diverse pool of mid to long range weapons, because that's one of the biggest problems right now. There's a lot of weapons that you can get rid of almost all the recoil in terms of the actual recoil blot, where you shoot into a wall, you pull down slightly, the bullets just go straight. But it's doing this, so you don't feel like it's doing straight. So you feel like you have to make these macro adjustments that are just impossible for a weapon model that doesn't make sense. Here is what we're talking about with this balancing and why this is so important. If you look at last season with Cold War, we had the DMR meta, which started at the beginning, and that's what this graph is from Warzone Ranked. They posted this over on their Twitter if you want to go check it out, and you can see that as soon as it got nerfed, everyone stopped using it, and then there was still the MAC-10, which was pretty dominant because it had a broken blueprint. And then you can see once it got fixed at the start of season 2, it dropped off, but then we ended up with this FFAR meta, which was kind of broken, and they tried to balance it. And then you can see that one also got nerfed. And these are, when they have a weapon, it's overpowered, they make these dramatic nerfs that nerf them to the dirt, and that's what we're seeing here with these particular patterns. In season 3, it had a pretty balanced meta. AMAX was kind of the dominant long range along with the Kar 98, depending on what you wanted to snipe. And then you can see what most people were using beyond that. Some people are still using like the M16, AUGs. Those were pretty solid, but those also got nerfed. Then we had the Faro, which was insanely broken. It was so good. And then that got nerfed, and then the Krig became overpowered. You can see that kind of graph. And then right around season 5 is when everything kind of hit its stride, and there were so many weapons that were very viable. Obviously, at the end of season 6, we had the EM2, which was kind of broken. That's probably one of the most powerful weapons here. You can see it was kind of on the upslope, along with the AK-47. OTS was dominant SMG. And then as we got into Vanguard, you can see this little line right here is the MP40 all the way at the top, a huge gap. MP40 is by far the most popular weapon because it is the most viable weapon in more scenarios than anything else up close, obviously besides the shotguns, right? Then we have the STG just because so many people had it leveled, but the Bren, you can see right here, it was off the chart. No one was using, and then all of a sudden, whoomp, went all the way up as soon as they made some adjustments to the automaton, which we had right at the beginning. You can see the orange, it was kind of creeping, going to be top meta, and then it fell off because they nerfed it right away. And what we're going to see is these lines should almost be touching, and then you're going to be able to use dozens of weapons. And then we're going to get that new SMG that they're going to be adding with the mid-season update, I believe, which will probably be a challenge to unlock. Then you're good to go. One thing I would recommend is getting their Trello board pinned to your dashboard, and that's what we're looking at here, and it lists the vast majority of the issues within the game. Whether you're on console or on PC, people are dealing with tons of issues, whether it's graphical issues, XP issues, bugs, whatever. They are mostly listed within here. If they're not, that's how you got to let them know, hey, this is an issue. A lot of times people say, JGOD, why didn't you mention this? Why haven't you mentioned this? And I'm like, it's on their Trello board. They already know about it. Complaining about an issue that they're already aware of is not going to fix it. So that's sometimes, obviously, their QA testers were out of the office. Some people were on strike. People were on vacation. That is coming back together. These things will get fixed because they are big problems and people are willing to work. So hopefully it gets fixed sooner than later, but the Trello board is where you're going to find most of that information. I'm excited for mid-season event, for them to get everything fixed so that people can start enjoy the game again, because people are playing the game despite it being broken. And that tells you a lot about how much people enjoy the game. Appreciate all the support on the content. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.